It's a Tuesday episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Damichael, Cole, and myself back together. This time we're talking Oklahoma City through the lens of the Grizzlies. Why are the Thunder so much better at grizzing than the Grizz? Pause. And then why are the Thunder starting to get some backlash? Maybe not exactly the same as the Grizzlies have gotten over the last few years, but there's definitely some disdain, at least building online towards OKC. Why is that? We'll talk about that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax, joined by my wonderful co-host, Damichael Cole, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Damichael, you had a nice little weekend getaway. I'm very jealous. I told our Friday audience that I live vicariously through you at this point, partner. So no pressure. I hope you had a good time.
Had a great time. I had a great time. You know, it's okay, Joe, because one day I'm looking forward to, my family trips and things like that. So, we're going to flip. The page is going to flip some point, and I'm going to start living through you. So I think that's just the stage we're in right now.
Happy Gilmore 2 is coming out. There's another movie, if you've never seen it, partner, called Billy Madison. Have you ever seen that movie with Adam Sandler?
Yeah. You blew it!
Yeah, that one. That's exactly right. Well, there's a scene in that film where he grabs the face of a young man and he tells him to stay here. Stay as long as you can. Cherish it. Not that I would say that in any way, shape, or form about my life with my wonderful wife and my 3 beautiful children. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Google. Make us a part of your Memphis Grizzlies NBA content consumption each and every time that an episode drops. Michael appreciates it. I appreciate it. We appreciate it that you are here. Hopefully you're an everydayer each and every time we have an episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Hopefully you're with us wherever you take in your podcast. Michael, yesterday on the show, I decided to preview the NBA Finals through the lens of Grizzlies Pacers. And there was some good and some bad with that. You know, as things tend to happen when you're not around, I'm good at pissing people off in the comments. And, again, I appreciate that those folks listen and watch just like anybody else. So, my Morant not being as good as Halliburton, which again, you know that eats me alive to say out loud.
Oh yeah.
Halliburton is better than Morant.
Definitely.
But that I don't know how you could say he isn't at this stage. But anyway, this isn't about the Pacers today. This is about the Oklahoma City Thunder. And if there's one thing that I'm pretty sure everybody can universally agree upon, it is that the Oklahoma City Thunder are better than the Memphis Grizzlies. And they're better than the Memphis Grizzlies in almost every way, which is really disheartening because they're even better at the things that the Grizzlies like to do, whether it's transition offensive opportunities, playing good defense, whether it is having a guard who commands the offense, having an elite unicorn-esque big. There are so many boxes that you can check, Damichael, where you say, crap, OKC's just better at being Memphis than Memphis is.
Yeah, they're built around their defense, and that is something that we've seen, in Memphis kind of be the hallmark for years. Even if you want to go back to, 2005, 2006, those days, with Hubie Brown leading the way, those teams, they weren't really super talented or anything like that, but they played really hard. They got a lot of deflections. They got a lot of steals. They forced turnovers. And you saw during the grit and grind era, the grittiness that those teams consistently played with. And then when you got into this area, Joe, you saw some of the same thing from the standpoint of everything starts on the defensive end. And what comes of the team after that, like this era has been a little bit flashier, right? Alley-oops, Morant's, playing style, Desmond Bane knocking down a bunch of 3-pointers, things like that. You got that mixed in, but the hallmark has always been the defensive end. We're going to turn you over. We're going to force steals. We're going to force blocks. They've always been near the top of the leagues in stocks, but OKC has taken that and gone to a whole nother level. And they got it in abundance. Like, it's not a situation where the Grizzlies, even Mike Conley was a great defender, back then, but Tony Allen was next level, right? Marc Gasol, was a really good defender back then, but Tony Allen was next level. You could look at Oklahoma City and you could say they have at least 3 guys who are next level, at least. Like, I can make that argument for Chet Holmgren. I can make that argument for Lou Dort. I can make that argument for Jalen Williams. I can make that argument for Alex Caruso. I can make that argument for Cason Wallace. That's 5 right there. Some people will
haven't
go
even brought up their best player, SGA, who is a good defender in his own right, if not better than good.
And I've been talking about that for a while, and we saw it in that last series. This is another thing when you talk about being better at the Grizz in certain categories. I thought Anthony Edwards, he had the right idea, saying, "Hey, look, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, talented scorer. He works very hard on the offensive end. I'm going to attack him defensively. I'm going to create mismatches or quote unquote mismatches and isolate him against me, and let's see what he does." And every time, not literally every time, but for the most part, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander held his own, and it wasn't long before they realized this isn't a matchup that you could just attack. Whereas we go back to those playoff series with the Grizzlies, less of this past one, but you go back to that Lakers matchup, I remember vividly them. I mean, wherever Ja Morant was, that man was coming to set a screen for LeBron James to get Ja Morant isolated against LeBron, or to get him to hedge so the Lakers can create some type of advantage.
Pretty impressive when you think about it, what SGA's body of work is. And I said on yesterday's show, Nikola Jokic is in my opinion, the undisputed best player on the planet. SGA wins the MVP. SGA is a better two-way player, I would say, than Jokic is. It's just Jokic has such an extensive bag offensively compared to what SGA brings to the table. But again, SGA had a phenomenal year, very deserving MVP. And I think that what the Thunder do especially well is not just on the court, but off of it, right? It's organizationally, whether it's Presti as the GM, whether it's, I always mispronounce it, Dagnall, I think is how you say it roughly.
Yep.
Yeah, they're even better than Memphis at finding random members of a coaching staff and giving them opportunity. And I know Dagnall's been there at OKC for a while.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, to the way that they've acquired draft capital, the way that they've built up this roster, every single member of this team is under contract for 2025, 2026. They don't have to do a thing if they don't want to, but they have the assets in place that if they want to go bring in a Kevin Durant, hell, if they want to bring in a Giannis, it's not outside of the realm of possibility. They have one of the best possible trade packages alongside the Spurs and the Rockets. They're right in that mix. And we'll make our official finals predictions later on in the show or on Thursday.
Yeah.
But later on in the week, point being, you could easily argue that the Thunder should be favored to sweep the Pacers. I don't know that they will, but we're talking about one of the most dominant teams in NBA history, and they could run it back word for word, piece for piece if they wanted to. That's absurd.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the best parts when you talk about this Oklahoma City team is, to me, we talk about the hate watch. I think we'll get more into that in the second segment. But when you talk about the things that they're good at, the things that they're great at, a lot of people say, "Oh, this team's going to be broken up in a few years anyway. It's okay." And actually, they're built for the long term because Shai, they can pay him. We'll see how the Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren contracts end up, but they, in theory, could pay all of those guys, and then they have all these draft assets and this draft capital where they can go get really talented players with that draft capital to put around those players and kind of replenish that group when other guys like Cason Wallace looks like the type of guy they're not going to be able to pay in 3-4 years. Like he just gives me so much Drew Holiday. When I see him, I see Drew Holiday. And they're not going to be able to pay him if he really turns out to be that type of player. So turning it back to the Grizzlies side, like that is something I think about, with the Grizzlies, whereas the Grizzlies are in a position, they have all of their assets for the future, right? After you get past the first round pick that they traded for Marcus Smart, they control all their future first round assets, and they have several second round picks as well. They can theoretically put themselves in a position where, they'll be able to build around those core guys. But it all goes back to the fact that, do we trust these as a core? I think in Oklahoma City, you could look at that group, you say, "Oh yeah, we trust that group." But in Memphis, Ja, Des, Jaren, it's still an incomplete situation. So I think the Grizzlies are built right now to kind of build around their core. But the question is if they trust that core.
The fascinating thing about OKC is that they could literally keep all three of those guys together, Williams and Holmgren and SGA, pay them all max contracts, and then just draft a bunch of dudes over the next 6 or 7 years and rookie deals, and they're the ones that replenish. And that's possible. There's so many different angles that they can take. It really is fascinating. Let Damichael and I know on X. Hit us up in the comments. How are you feeling looking at this OKC team? Again, one of my biggest takeaways from the playoffs was Memphis is far away from OKC, but so is everybody else. And we're about to find out just how far away they are from the Eastern Conference here in a couple of days as the NBA Finals get underway. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will discuss some of this Thunder backlash that we're seeing. There's multiple reasons for it, how we can connect it to the Grizzlies. Such a big topic. I think it can cover a couple of segments. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time that you had an urgent need, maybe a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait around and hope that they called you back? Probably not. You moved on along. That's why you need OpenPhone. It's the #1 business phone system to build up and streamline your customer communications, scaling it for you all from an app on your phone or computer. OpenPhone lets you manage business calls and text from a single app, and their AI agent handles after-hour calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer. OpenPhone is offering our listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. So, Damichael, I remember, I like to think back on these times longingly. I wish we had like a sounder where it could be like, back in the day kind of stuff. Memphis was OKC before OKC was OKC. And as I've said several times, I don't need people yelling at me in the comments. The Thunder are clearly better at it than Memphis, right? Clearly, they're, like we said earlier in the show, they're better at grizzing than the Grizz. But it was the Grizzlies bit first, the celebrations after wins and the dancing next to, Andrews from ESPN and all these different things that the Grizzlies were, the energy, it was immaculate. The vibes were immaculate. That was Memphis first. And then it became the Thunder's thing. And again, they've done it better than the Grizzlies ever did. But you're starting to see some backlash to the Thunder around this mindset of whether it's SGA as a free throw merchant. Maybe we can touch on that a little bit here. The idea of the Thunder being this young and brash team. I don't think that they get the same rep that Memphis did because SGA as a superstar is different than Ja was as a superstar. The audacity, the way that they play the game, the way they interact with people. I don't envision, and maybe I've missed this in a presser, Damichael, I don't envision SGA going out there and talking about pigeons or anything like that, right? Like, I don't think that's going to be a thing. So I do think there's a difference organizationally, what Ja does compared to SGA as the two superstars. Right. But I do think that there are some common threads in terms of Memphis's backlash, very different in terms of how it came about. But you're starting to see some people hate on this Thunder team, which, is fascinating because there's not really much to hate.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the team, right, they're opposite for the Grizzlies in certain ways. One thing, when you talk about the 2021-22 Grizzlies, 56 wins, hit the scene, youngest team in the league, just like this OKC team. Those are the parallels. But when you get past that and you peel it back another layer, those Grizzlies teams, Desmond Bain was telling LeBron James, we ain't scared of them footsteps. John Morant was talking trash.
They were actively getting in people's faces. Isn't that we ain't ducking no smoke? We're running.
Yeah, we're running up the chimney. That was that year. Yep. And then of course the next year the fight in the West happens. But yeah, that was kind of the persona. It wasn't just Ja. It was more so Dillon Brooks. Dillon Brooks was the captain of that ship, and we see people talking about it now, like, some of the swagger of the team left when Dillon Brooks left, and you can say however you feel on that end, but that's been a point of conversation over the last couple of years since he's been gone. Whereas OKC, they're quiet. They're a lot more methodical. I saw it actually in an SGA press conference a day or two ago. They were asking him about, trash talking, things like that. Well, handling his emotions. He said, I feel exactly, like, trust me, I feel it. Like the emotion is there, but he's learned how to like compose himself and bottle it in and things like that. And look, at the end of the day, these guys are completely different people. So there's no one way of doing this. Michael Jordan talked, a bunch of crap. Kobe Bryant talked a bunch of crap. Larry Bird, some people say he's the greatest trash talker of all time. All these guys were champions. It's not to say if you talk trash, you won't win championships. Like, that's not the point. It's more so we're pointing out just some of the, the parallels and the differences when you talk about the Grizzlies and the Thunders. And the Grizzlies have been more of that trash talk type of team, and they've kind of, walked away from that over the last year or so. But yeah, that's one thing that stands out to me. But then when you look at it from the fans' point of view, Joe, and you just touched on it a little bit there as well. Like, it was probably a month before I joined the beat. I got here December 2021, and I believe it was November 21. It might have been earlier in December. But it was the 2021 season where the Grizzlies 2021-22 season. The Grizzlies beat the Thunder by 73 points.
73 points.
It set an NBA record. Some of those guys, if you go look at the box score, there are multiple guys who are on that Thunder roster. They're on this current roster. Like, they witnessed this. They were a part of it. And there were a couple guys, like I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander didn't play in that game or whatever the case may be, but he was on the roster, So there is this part as a fan where I can understand if you say, man, we were the youngest team in the NBA. We had Ja on a rookie deal at the time. We had Dez on a rookie deal at the time. We had Jaren on a descending contract. Why didn't we strike then? Because that's what OKC's doing right now. OKC had Shai on a second contract, yes, but Jalen Williams, rookie deal. Chet Holmgren, rookie deal. You know what they did? They went and paid Isaiah Hartenstein. They paid Lou Dort. Nice extension. Whole bunch of money. When they got Alex Caruso, because they were able to do that. And that's where, we talk about the front offices and how they handled those situations. In particular, and Joe, we've talked about it 100 times over. It's a situation where I think if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see this. But if these two teams are going towards the same destination, and where they rived off towards different exits was when the Grizzlies said, we're trading DeAnthony Melton, David Roddy, Jake LaRavia, Vince Williams, Kennedy Chandler, you're up. You know what the Thunder did? Josh Giddey, you got a whole lot of potential. You're going to be a nice NBA player. Get out of here. Let's go get Alex Caruso, NBA champion. Played over 20 minutes per game in the finals before. All-league defender. Been there, done that. Let's go get a vet. That's the word. Let's go get a vet. Chet Holmgren, you held it down as a big. Let's go get you some help. Let's go pay Hartenstein close to $30 million a year. Big 3-year deal. So that's where they went in different directions. The Thunder, with all that draft capital, Joe, you know this, I know this, everyone's listening knows this. The Thunder, with all that draft capital, could have said, man, let's package some of these picks. Let's move up in the draft. In the Grizzlies situation, they moved up in the draft. Well, they traded DeAnthony Melton. First-round pick, David Roddy. Doesn't pan out. Oklahoma City took the more aggressive route. They took the more sure route. They went and got an all-league defender. They got one of the best rising bigs, Isaiah Hartenstein, after he had a strong year. And that's the difference. Joe, that is literally, if you talk about where these teams just drifted in different directions, the Grizzlies went younger. OKC emphasized putting vets. And those vets have been important. Isaiah Hartenstein has been important. Alex Caruso, I mean, he's been super impactful. You put that with what they have in those young guys, that's the winning recipe right there.
And they have an identity and they know who they are, right? Like, I think you could say very clearly, we make fun, or I make fun for the sake of clarity. I make fun of the we need dogs, right? Like, we need dogs. That's what Zach Kleiman says. Well, OKC knew they needed dogs 3 years ago, and look at where the Thunder are. Those veteran presence guys, and Memphis needs that. Are they going to be able to get that? That's the question that we'll continue to tackle here on Locked On Grizzlies as the offseason grinds forth here in the coming days and weeks. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will close out this episode of the show. I want to come back to the free throw merchant topic and how Damichael, who watches so much basketball, that seems like the biggest knock on OKC at the moment is it's like watching, there's watching the OKC team. There's a video that somebody made online.
I get emails about this.
The OKC team that had Russell Westbrook and James Harden and all the entertaining Kevin Durant scoring. And then here's this OKC team with SGA at the free throw line, right? That's the highlights. We'll dive into that and maybe connect it to Ja Morant and his highlight reel being a little bit more impressive coming up next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stick around. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Betterhelp. Let's talk about something that doesn't get talked about enough: men's mental health. There is this pressure to always keep it together, to perform, to provide, never show weakness. But the truth is, real strength comes from opening up and taking care of your well-being. Every year, 6 million men in the United States experience depression, and many go undiagnosed. But talking to someone, a friend, a loved one, or a therapist can make a huge difference. Therapy isn't just for crisis moments. It's great for learning how to set boundaries, build healthy coping tools, and be the best version of yourself. You can connect from anywhere, switch therapists at any time, and fit sessions into your schedule with just a click. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedonnba. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. Damichael, we were talking about why there's this Thunder backlash, right? And the connection to the Grizzlies. I thought you did an excellent job breaking that down. I really want to dive into this SGA free throw merchant thing because, as I mentioned before, the idea of, Russell Westbrook and how, to me, that is the closest comp to Ja, right? Not necessarily in terms of playing style. I'm talking about like the highlights. Prime Russell Westbrook. You want to talk about going viral? This dude was violent. If Ja is audacious, Westbrook was violent at the rim. And that, stands out in your mind's eye and your memory when you think about those old OKC teams. And I don't think it's everybody online. That's important to point out. But it's prevalent enough that you even hear Doris Burke bringing up the free throw merchant stuff during, ESPN broadcasts.
That was wild.
Yeah, and I mean, then Doris Burke is phenomenal, right? For my money, she's the best NBA analyst there is. But for her to bring it up, right? It's almost like, your mom or your dad or your grandma and grandpa learning a new term and maybe using it at a time or place that they're not supposed to. But I'm curious, again, you watch so much basketball, obviously Grizzlies ball, but other hoops as well. Going into this final series, going back to the Thunder Grizzlies series, what do you make of this free throw merchant thing? Because when I watch SGA, it's kind of like watching James Harden in that it's not so much about seeking out fouls, it's seeking out contact and understanding how to utilize and position your body, which is a skill in and of itself to get those scoring opportunities that allow for greater offensive efficiency. It's kind of like the tush push in the NFL. As a Commanders fan, I hate the freaking Philadelphia Eagles, and I hate that they can do the tush push. But you know what? Everybody has the ability to do the tush push. The Eagles are just the best at it. Yeah. Everybody can play the system, so to speak, when it comes to being able to draw this contact. It's guys like SGA that have it down to an art, and that is the difference, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the difference. And look, this is someone talking who Damichael Cole. I get very annoyed, and I got the names off the top of my head. I was very annoyed when James Harden used to do it. I've been very annoyed. I was in Philly for a few years, and Embiid being 280 pounds and falling over the floor. It's like, come on, man, you them guys ain't really knock you down like that. Like, come on now, like let's be for real here. And Shea, in the same way, is equally as irritating, but in the same light with Joel Embiid, I don't give Harden the same amount of credit as I do. Now, as a facilitator, yes. But there are a lot of ways when you take away the free throw shooting, he's still elite. Like, you take away the free throw shooting, his field goal percentage numbers are still really efficient. He can still get to those same spots. He has the ability to play through contact when the rare times that it does happen. You might disagree with me, but you watch it. There's been several. I mean, there were a couple Grizzlies games where, he had and ones where guys knocked him off his spot and he converted the shots. So, here's where I stand on it, Joey, because I want to take a strong stance here. And I hate everything about it, and I want the league to, just like every summer we talk about this, it feels like, reevaluate the rules around this. And with each player, it's something. With James Harden and Joel Embiid had it bad too. It was the low rip through, right? They'd have the ball feel like always down to about their knees, and they just rip through going up. And then as soon as you touch them, they just scream and they throw the ball in the air, and it's like, come on. James Harden, the other one that he had bad was he would, grab the opponent's arm. You remember that one, Joe, where he'll wrap his arm around the opponent's arm and then make it look as if the opponent was lynching onto his arm and like he's trying to pull away. And you had a lot of opponents like holding their hands up, like, what am I supposed to do? He's literally grabbing my arm and like, but the league corrected those things. The rip through is still, like we see Ja doing it. Dez does it. Like, I've talked to them about this, someone like incorporating it into their game. Like the rips through, because at the end of the day, the rip through is a legit thing. It can be a foul if you literally do a rip through and they hit you on the wrist or whatever the case may be. But I don't think that was the initial idea when they started doing that move. It was more to like kind of bait guys or whatever the case may be. The one that I hate more than anything,
the spirit of the rule, right? That's what we're talking about, is spirit of the rule here.
Joe, I got one that I hate as much as any of those. When Shea goes up the court and he bumps into a guy, like he seeks them out, bumps into them, and then knocks himself off platform and gets whistle. It blows my mind. Blows my mind. It happened against the Grizzlies. Happened against the Timberwolves.
But how much of that is his fault, and how much of that is the fault of the officials? Like that's kind of where I'm at. If he understands that this is happening, everybody in the NBA can do this. He's just the one that's doing it. So
that's
are we saying that, it's against the code? Is this like a Steve Kerr, it's the code BS kind of thing? Or is it just
because it's not ethical hoops, right? That's the way you say. It's not the ethical hoops.
Right. And what the hell does that even mean, ethical hoops? This guy's playing the game the way that's being officiated.
This is like,
how is that any different than framing a pitch?
Yeah.
How is that any different than a catcher framing? You watch the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah. It's not much different because it's the game within the game. This is just like when me and you used to talk about the difference between a hooper and a basketball player and those type of things. It's all one and the same. So with that being said, my thing with Shea is he's incredibly skilled too. Like a lot of his fouls, Joe, are because he's so slippery. He's always been that way. He was that way in Kentucky. Like, he's not the fastest guy, but his agility, his left to right, his back and forth is as good as I've ever seen. Ever.
Ginobili-esque. Probably better than Ginobili. But it reminds me of watching Manu play.
The left to right, there are a lot of guys that have that. But you got to, like, usually you can distinguish the two. Like Ginobili, I think he was really good left to right. His agility was very good, but the step back was more of the James Harden thing, the ability to drive to one spot and then stop on a dime and just create space that way. Luka, using his size, using his shoulder. Shea does both. And here's a conversation I had with a Grizzlies player one time. We were talking about, because newsflash, Grizzlies players hate the way that he draw fouls. And as soon as that matchup was up, I already was thinking, like, they got to win the mental game before they even try to beat OKC on the physical standpoint, because they're already thinking, oh, here we go. And that's what most teams are thinking when they go against SGA. So he already has that mental edge against most teams, because they're like, well, we can't guard him. Like, I saw Anthony Edwards say that before, and I was like, oh, he's toast. He's already toast. He lost mentally. Because what you do is you go in playing your game and then, you adjust accordingly. But with all that being said, I was talking to a Grizzlies player one time. He just pointed out these little subtle things to go with the left to right, to go with the back and forth that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander does that just makes you so uncomfortable. And he was telling me, it's a conversation from a while ago, so I don't remember it verbatim, but he was like, Shai has this unique ability where he's better than most players, where, Joe, he will attack the point of one of your feet. Like, he's looking at, like, I forget who the player was I was talking to the Grizzlies, but he's telling me, like, he's looking at the positioning of your feet. And as soon as he sees you shuffle one foot in a direction, he's tacking the point of that foot. And when he does that, you know what you're going to start doing? You're going to start playing defense with your hands because you can't slide your feet to an optimal position. So you got to, if you can't play with your feet, what are you going to do? You're going to play with your hands or you're going to play with your chest. And either way, he's going to get the whistle. So a lot of it is, as you pointed out, the skillfulness that he has as well.
Again, everybody can do it. It's available there for all. I think that unless they're going to take it out of the game, again, spirit of the rule, why not take some keys from what SGA is doing? I think the Grizzlies could do that across the board, not just with SGA, but the entire organization. Thank you guys so much for being with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is much appreciated. Damichael, obviously, on tomorrow's show, we'll be looking ahead a little bit to the NBA Finals, obviously revisiting, talking about maybe Jaren's extension a little bit, because, again, literally the day after the Finals are over, and I feel like most folks are expecting a quick NBA Finals. Literally after that's done, we'll be able to talk Jaren extension more extensively. So maybe kind of revisiting some of those things. Maybe there's anything you've heard of late, that kind of stuff.
And not just Jaren, Santi.
Santi's big too. Yeah.
That's another big one. And I know when we talked about it on a previous show, there were people on both sides of the fence when I kind of made the case for Santi in a reserve role or whatever the case may be. But yeah, that's another big one that as soon as the season ends, the Grizzlies are going to be able to, have some conversations and try to figure out some things. So, yeah, a lot of relevant conversations about to happen around here.
Now that you have made Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today, for your second listen, you should check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you are liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get podcasts for us as well here at Locked On Grizzlies, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. It is all good. We will continue to grind forth heading into the rest of June, heading into the NBA Finals, talking Grizzlies basketball and so much more here on Locked On Grizzlies. For Damichael, I am Joe. Stay locked in. We will be back tomorrow. Make sure that you are there wherever you get your podcast the next time an episode drops. See you.